Okay, hi guys, this is Floyd. Welcome to our first 3ds Max tutorial. Uh, I hope this finds you well, and I really hope that this will give you a good introduction to this program, maybe stimulate your interest enough to learn more on your own, or, you know, even enroll maybe in schools that teach you about this. But I'm going to give you what I've learned in 4 or 5 years of simply doing this program as a hobby. And I'm going to provide what a lot of these other tutorials and programs don't offer you, which is instant gratification. I'm going to try in every lesson to help you to create something that you can feel good about. And in doing so, um, I'll teach you about the facets of 3ds Max that I know about. And I certainly don't know about all of them. I don't claim to be the world's greatest authority on this. I do claim to be someone who has spent a good deal of time playing with the program, learning it, and adapting what I do in it to my own needs and interests. And I'll tell you that I started out using a program called Ray Tracer, and it was interesting and it was very fun, but you had to type code for everything you did. And I started looking around for a program that had a more drag and drop, um, more graphical interface. And I happened upon 3ds Max. I tried some other programs like Maya and and a couple of others, and found the learning curve for just getting into them to be just a little too steep. I did not find that to be true with Max. I found that you could use Max practically immediately to produce results that gave me pleasure. So I'm going to try to help you do that. In order to do that, we're going to have to go through a little bit of didactic instruction here. And what I would like to start with is simply what you see when you open 3ds Max, which is you see four rectangles on the screen. You see a toolbar, or a couple of toolbars on the top. You see a toolbar, some icons here on the right, and you see some a toolbar and a timeline here on the bottom. Now, in beginning 3ds Max, let me just say that there are always several ways to do something. If I want to create a sphere, there's several ways to do it. We can be very simple ways, can be very complicated. So I'm into the simplicity of it. And because I want to feel good about what I'm doing, I want to get something done, I want to have something I can look at and say, boy, I created that. So just for the beginner here, and I trust I won't insult any of you by going over some of the stuff, which for some of you, you may think, well, it's self-explanatory, but it's not for everyone. So let's look at the interface that we're presented with. I just showed you the toolbars, and now we're looking at the four rectangles, sort of, that mostly fill the screen. These rectangles are sizable. I can go here in the middle and, you know, make some of them bigger, some of them larger. The default view is generally good for starting out. I'm going to go ahead and create an object before I've even discussed how to create objects, because I want us to get a feel for what we're looking at here and how we view objects in these viewports. Help us to figure out what these viewports are for and why there are four of them. So 3ds Max loves teapots. It happens to be their symbol, and they like it so much that they actually put a teapot button over here in this create and modify panel, which is as good a name as any for what this is over here. And if I go over here and hit the first button that we see, this is the create button. And every time you drag in Max and in many other 3D programs, every time you drag your mouse over a button or something, you'll get a little tool tip that pops up. And when I drag it over, I've increased the size of my mouse for this tutorial, but if it weren't so big, you'd see Create show up when I simply move my mouse over this button. So if I hit that button, and the one beneath it too, which says Geometry, so it says Create Geometry, and I look down, and there's a button, lo and behold, there's a button for teapot. Well, they really do love teapots. So how do we create a teapot? Well, for our purposes right now, we just click into any viewport, drag, and unclick. That will create a teapot. Let's go into, just because, notice that these viewports are named right now, top, front, left, and perspective. And I'll explain all that to you over the next few minutes. But right now, in the top viewport, I'm going to click right in the very center of the viewport, hold my mouse, and drag out a teapot. Very simple indeed. Now I'm in creation mode, and so every time I click now, I'm going to create another teapot. Well, unless I want like multiple teapots, I want to get out of creation mode, and I get out of creation mode by right-clicking. I'll delete that teapot so it doesn't get in our way. I'm going to do something else right now that I haven't discussed, but we will discuss it. I'm going to go down here to the very bottom right button on the screen, and it says Maximizes Viewport Toggle. Here, Zoom Extensol, sorry, right above it. When I hit Zoom Extensol, it brings everything into the sort of the biggest it can be within the viewport. Helps to look at it. I'm also going to do one other thing here. I'm going to go to where it says Wireframe, and I'm going to click Smooth and Highlight. I'm going to do this in every viewport because it's going to help us to see what we're looking at here and how we're looking at things. And that should help explain things right now. If you look at what we call top viewport, you'll see that we're looking at the top of the teapot. If you go to the left viewport, now highlighted in yellow, we're looking at, if you want to think of it that way, the left side of the teapot. Front, we're looking at maybe the front side of the teapot. And in this final viewport, perspective, we're kind of looking at a viewport that you can move around. If you go to the second to the last button on the screen here on the bottom, it says Orbit. Click that orbit, and a yellow circle appears in this perspective viewport. Now let me say, I'm going to click inside that yellow circle, and I'm going to move this teapot around. You can see by looking at the other viewports that I'm not really moving the teapot. I'm really looking at the position from which I'm viewing the teapot. So it's like panning a camera around, like having a camera in your hand and panning it around. Now, let me say as a word of caution, I'm right-clicking to end that mode. I can always go back and hit Orbit again. Stay inside this yellow circle when you're panning here. If you try panning from outside this yellow circle, some unfortunate things are going to happen. Nothing terrible, nothing that can't be undone, but it does have some undesirable effects, which you will undoubtedly run into as you go forward in 3ds Max and say, gosh, I wish I hadn't clicked outside this circle. But these are generally, by default, the 4 ways of looking at things. And you know, when we're working on an object, for instance, if I wanted to change this teapot in some way, I might want to look at it very largely. I might want it to fill the whole screen. Again, now I can go to that last button on the screen down here. It says Maximize Viewport Toggle. Click it. Well, that viewport now fills the whole screen, and I can look at a good bit of detail. And if I change it back to I come back here to smooth and highlights and change it to wireframe. And there are some other options, but right now these are all we're concerned about. There's the teapot. Now, if I, again, we're going back to teapots. If you look up here in this toolbar, which is in brown here, and I'm moving my mouse across it, if you go to the far right, you'll see a teapot that when I move over it says render production. That takes, if you will, a snapshot of whatever view you happen to be in. In this case, we're in the front view. If I just hit that, well, there's a snapshot of what I'm looking at. Very useful. Very useful. Now I can go back to smooth plus highlights if I like looking at the teapot, you know, shaded and better. Now you're going to notice something about this teapot. Well, first of all, we're going to go back to looking at 4 views, and again, I simply go down to that maximize button and hit it again. That unmaximizes it. Now I have the four viewports. This is how we look at things. You have now created your first object in 3ds Max, and really it was, I think, very simple. It's a pre-assembled object, so we didn't have to be very creative. But before we leave this tutorial, I want to go back over here to this panel, and instead of this first button, which we found out was create, I want you to look at the one just to the right of it. It looks like a curved cylinder or tube. Click on it. This is the modify button, and you'll use this just quite a lot. Now I can modify the parameters of this teapot. And what are the parameters? Well, what is the radius, or that is the size of it? Use this little slider bar, not a slider bar, but a click wheel. I can type a value in, 25, enter. I don't know what our units are right now. It's probably set to inches. We'll deal with units later. Right now, we just want something to look at. Again, I can use this little click wheel to change that. Underneath it says teapot parts. By unclicking body, body goes away. By unclicking handle, handle goes away. Again, same with spout and lid. Same with spout and lid. If I unclick all of them, it all goes away. Oh, you can see, this might be a useful little tool. What if I wanted to make a coffee cup? Well, I could just use handle and body. That makes a fairly nice looking coffee cup. Right now, let's bring them all back and think about what we're looking at. If you look at it, you'll see that it's a rather crude looking teapot. A lot of straight lines here. Understanding everything in straight lines. So in order to make something a curve, you have to use enough straight lines to approximate curves. And so if you look at the second little parameter here, it says segments. If I go down on these segments to one segment, oh, really crude looking, awful. But what if I go up to 8? Wow, everything's smoothed out. I went a little too high. Everything's smoothed out, and if I click into that and render that frame, oh, what a much better looking teapot. Much better. What's the difference? Well, look at it this way. If I'm looking at this teapot from a distance in a scene, say I have it sitting on a kitchen counter, I've used it as a prop, if it's only 4 and it's at some distance, and I render the scene, it doesn't make any difference if it's crude looking because I'm not getting a close enough look at it. But if I'm looking at it up this close, it makes a great deal of difference if it's detail work. What's the downside? Well, the downside is the more I increase the segments of it, the more computer memory it takes to store the information needed to create and modify the teapot. So you sacrifice memory and speed for detail. That is one of the basic rules of 3D modeling. The less detail, the faster things go. The more detail, the slower things go. And that's where we're going to end it for today. We're going to come back in the next lesson. We're going to draw a plane here, something for this teapot to sit on. We're going to light it. We're going to color it. We're going to add a light that casts a shadow. And you're going to be amazed at how something as artificial right now looking as this teapot can be made to look very realistic. So see you in the next tutorial. Later, guys.